Hello folks, my name is Mark, this is Why I Hate the World. How you guys doing? So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Barbecue Becky. For those of you who haven't, it was an incident in Lake Merritt in Oakland, California, where a white woman called the cops on a couple of black guys who were in a park using a barbecue. And the supposed reason she gave was because supposedly you're not allowed to use a barbecue that uses charcoal in this park, which turned out to be complete bullshit. And what really happened was that, she didn't want black people in her neighborhood and saw a couple of guys, using a barbecue in a park and decided to give them shit. And this has since become a meme. If you watch the video, it starts with her yelling at these two guys, and then one of their friends shows up who also happens to be a white woman, and then suddenly this lady's attitude changes, and she goes from being like belligerent to like, suddenly I'm the victim and they're harassing me and all of this stuff. And then she's on the phone with the cops, and it's kind of cool to see because like the other lady who's the friend of the two black guys, doesn't back down, right? And basically chases her all the way back to her car, just fucking bitching her out. And, she deserves it, right? And the cops come and, they don't do anything, right? And the lady's on the phone crying and going, I'm in fear for my life, blah, 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 which was total fucking horseshit. Because she had to somebody like stood up to her, so she had to go for the fucking, I'm afraid for my life dodge, which was like, get the fuck out of here. And, the thing is, this kind of racial profiling has been a thing forever. I mean, I can remember news, stories in the news about racial profiling going back to the 90s, Back in the 90s, it was like people getting pulled over, driving while black, that kind of thing. Driving while Mexican, stuff like that, and getting in New York, getting searched, getting pat downs and stuff illegally because they were minorities. And then after 9/11, racial profiling at airports, that kind of thing, people who were like Muslims, and not only people who were Muslims, but people who looked Muslim, right? Brown people, getting searched unfairly, stuff like that, and it's really nothing new. But the twist on it is that lately it seems to be just ordinary people, civilians, who are doing the racial profiling versus, the authority figures, versus the police. And the good news to come out of it is that it seems to not be working, Now, there's always like a catch-22 when it comes to this kind of thing. Because you get one story in the news about, somebody being racially profiled, and then you'll get a series of them, similar stories will start popping up in the news as well. And that sort of becomes a thing through the news cycle. And you see this, in other subjects. You get one shooting, of a unarmed person by a cop, right? And then suddenly you get like 6 or 7 stories of the same thing happening. You get one story of a guy getting mugged, and then you'll get 6 or 7 stories of a guy getting mugged, or that sort of thing, right? And it's sort of, that's how it kind of happens, because when a story shows up in the news, it brings awareness to that issue. And then suddenly the other news stations and the other publications and venues, news venues, go out and they want to find similar stories, right? And that becomes part of the public discourse. And that's what's going on here, is this, so it kind of makes you think, like, because we've been seeing a lot of stories like this lately, the last month and a half, right? And it makes you think, well, how often does this kind of thing happen and we don't hear about it? So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, this all kind of started about a month ago or so when Starbucks called the cops on these two guys who were just waiting there. Two black guys were waiting at a Starbucks, waiting for a friend to show up, and the manager, tells them to get lost, and they go, they don't leave, right? And then the Starbucks called the cops on them, and why? Because they're black. Okay, now Here's the thing, right? I actually used to work at a Starbucks, right? About, 17 years ago. Actually, more like 15 years ago. I used to work at a Starbucks, and I was there for quite a while, you know. And one thing I can tell you is that you're not supposed to kick people out if they don't order stuff. All right, that's absolutely against the rules. At least it was back then, right? Starbucks wants you to come and hang out at their place and chill and check your email. Right, they're one of the first places to offer free Wi-Fi for that reason. They want people to come there and do work there and check their email there and just chill there. Take fucking naps there. Okay, that's what they want. They want people to do that. They want people to come in, use the bathroom, leave without buying because they want to make it like a friendly, like it's your home. That's exactly what they told us. This we want people to feel like this is their home, right? So the whole like you didn't order something leave thing is total fucking bullshit. That guy should be fired. Whoever was running that Starbucks should be fired. And Starbucks, to their credit, is going to be closing their stores for a day to have racial sensitivity training for their people. So they're handling it right. So obviously, the official policy of Starbucks is not to do this. Obviously, there was some racial profiling going on, and that kind of led to a bunch of other stories coming out. In Memphis, Tennessee, there's a guy who was a real estate investor, and the guy was black, and he was inspecting a house. He was an investor and also a housing inspector, and had the cops called on him by a 49-year-old white woman, right? And he showed his business card to her, and he showed her the paperwork, kind of, and permission from the homeowner showing that he was allowed to be there, and he was doing his job, and she called the cops on him anyway. And it's like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you call the cops on a guy who has the paperwork signed by the homeowner saying, I'm allowed to be here, this is my job, yet you call the cops on him anyway? I mean, what did you think? Do you think the guy was a scam artist? You think he's trying to break into the fucking house? It's like, I mean, come on, man. Another one, in Rialto, California, another white woman, right? Funny how all the antagonists in these little stories here happen to be white women, calls the cops on 3 black people leaving a house with their luggage, right? Turns out the house was an Airbnb, and these 3 people were renting it for the weekend. And the reason why she called the cops on them is because they didn't wave or smile at her when she left. Or when they left. They didn't wave back. So she must have assumed, I guess, that they were robbing the place, but robbing the place by packing things inside of their suitcases? It's like, what the fuck are you talking? It doesn't make any sense, I don't know. Another one, Pennsylvania. 5 black women were kicked out of a country club where they were golfing, and it's the Grandview Golf Course in York County, Pennsylvania. And apparently they were playing too slowly, so they got kicked out. Keep in mind these women actually were members of the club. One more pretty famous one at Yale University. A black student was sleeping in the common area of her dorm, and a white student that called the cops on him, right? And even though she lived there, and she had to show the police that she actually lived there. Now, in all of these cases, a little bit of common sense could have prevented all of the trouble to begin with. You're at a dorm at, Yale, right? Well, apparently you couldn't get into that dorm without, like, swiping your card through a fucking thing to open the door in the first place. So the fact that that person's there sleeping probably means that she lives there. Okay, I mean, what, is someone going to break into a fucking dorm to sleep? Right, get the fuck out of here. Right, it's this thing in the the golf course, right? These 5 women, they didn't jump the fence to go play golf. Okay, who the fuck breaks into a fucking place to play golf? Golf is like a sport that rich people play. They were members at this place. They're spending fucking hundreds of dollars so that they can come to this snooty ass place and play a fucking the most boring. And here's the thing about golf is that it's slow as fuck. I don't know. I don't play golf because I think it's stupid. It's like it takes fucking forever, right? You hit the ball, it goes way the fuck over there. It's like there's a reason why old people play it. Okay, because it's like the most antagonizingly slow and boring ass sport ever fucking made. So they're gonna kick these 5 people out for playing too slowly. That's like a complete, total fucking excuse. You know, this other thing in Tennessee, the one guy that's like a real estate dude, he's inspecting a house. He has all the paperwork, right? He has a business card. It's got his phone number on it. All of this other shit. Yet the lady called the cops on him anyway. It's like, I mean, there's really no other explanation. It's using common sense. You would see that these people aren't criminals, right? So why do you call the cops on them anyway? Okay. There's no what's the explanation? I mean, besides racism, that's really the only logical thing that makes sense in any of these cases, right? It's obvious, the racist motive behind all of these stories is obvious. There really is no other explanation. It doesn't make sense to say I thought they were criminals or I thought that I wasn't safe or any shit like that, And that just kind of goes to show to my earlier point, well, how often does this kind of thing happen and we don't hear about it? How many like instances out there are there like racial profiling by ordinary people, right, that we just don't hear about? Like there was another story about this lawyer guy who like went apeshit inside of a fucking Starbucks, yelling at Muslims and stuff. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. How often does shit like that happen all throughout the rest of the country, right? And I don't know. Just one final point though is that knowing what happens to minorities when they encounter the police in this country, it can have very, very deadly outcomes, right? So when you see a guy and you call the cops on him, you should really, really be sure that the person you're calling the police on is an actual criminal before you put them at risk like that. Seeing like, how police just have a tendency to shoot first and ask questions later, I mean, I could start listing off victims of, police shootings, people like Tamir Rice, if you want me to drive the point home. But, just keep that in mind. In all of these cases, the police were called in all of these that I listed. And these are just, and also keep in mind, these are only cases that have been brought to our attention because that's where the current focus is in the news, like I said before. And in each one of these could have had a very deadly outcome for the people involved who are completely innocent of any crime whatsoever. Think about how that feels. Think about that. Think about how, it must feel to be any of these people. This real estate inspector guy, right? Those 5 ladies on a golf course, the student sleeping in the building where she lives. Imagine what that must feel like to know that at any given moment, some random fucking person can call the police on you. And then the police could show up and you could potentially die for no reason at all. And then you're going to sit here and tell me that, like, racism is over in this country. Right? That kind of thing. That racism isn't a problem. It's like, no, man, it is. It totally fucking is. And it's like, I mean, the good news is that in each of these, they all had a happy ending. Nobody was hurt, But how many times does this kind of thing happen where it isn't a happy ending and we just don't know about it? That's America today, folks. Everyone's insane. That's all I got. Adios.